V T T T V V T Q V V T T T V V T Q V
Virtual teaching tips and tricks videos. Virtual teaching tips and tricks videos.
featuring Dr. Alan Labrique.
Hi everyone, I'm Alan Labrique, Professor and Associate Chair for Research in the Department of International Health. Today I'm going to be talking to you about some advanced features of the video teaching platform that we've all grown to know and love, known as Zoom. And I'm going to try to share with you some of the features that I found to be very useful in screen sharing, annotation, and whiteboard use. So many of you are familiar with the bar that shows up at the bottom of your screen when you launch into a Zoom meeting. And the button we're going to be focusing on today is the share screen icon that's highlighted in green here at the bottom of at the middle of the bar. So you'll notice that in Zoom, there are lots of different icons and small details that often can go missed if you're not carefully playing around with all of the different options. And one of the things that often gets missed in interacting with Zoom is the little caret that you'll see here, right to the right of the big green share screen button. Now that caret is important because it opens up what are called the advanced sharing options. So many of you may have run into the scenario where you ask someone to share their screen and they say, oh, it's not letting me share my screen. Basically what that means is somewhere in your preferences, it has been set to only the host can share. So by clicking on that little caret, you open up this window that allows you to change that to then say all participants, and then others can share their screen. It's a very common problem, very easily resolved, no reason for panic, and you can get on with your meeting. Now, the other important feature of sharing your screen that I often find people panic a little bit about is which of these options to choose once you click on share screen. You're given the choice of desktop 1, whiteboard, a couple of iPhones and iPads, and then you have the opportunity to share specific screens that are associated with applications that are running on your computer. Now, if you have 2 screens or 3 screens, that is to say dual monitors or triple monitors, it's very nice because you can actually use this desktop 1, desktop 2, or desktop 3 feature to select an entirely separate monitor where you will be presenting the things you want others to see during your Zoom meeting. So you can drag something onto that desktop and then drag it off and replace it with something else as you're going through the complex content of your meeting agenda. Now, for many of us, if we only have one screen or a laptop and we don't have that ability to designate an entire screen's real estate to the sharing function, then you might want to select a particular window. So a particular window within an application, or whether that's a browser or a Word document or a PowerPoint window. But very often, one of the common problems you see is people who are trying to share a full screen presentation get stymied because what they've done is they've shared the PowerPoint window, but when they're sharing the full screen presentation, it's not showing up. So if you're going to use a single screen and you're sharing your full screen presentation, my recommendation is to use the desktop 1 sharing option, and then you can be sure that when you go to full screen, what the audience will be seeing is the entire presentation as you intended them to see. Now, keep in mind that that does put you to a couple of inconveniences. One is you won't be able to have those back channel conversations while other speakers are chatting because your entire screen is taken up with your presentation. Now, if, however, you're sharing another document, let's say I'm sharing a Word document, but I've chosen to share my entire desktop, keep in mind that folks can see your entire desktop once you minimize your Word window or close it. So if you had a separate conversation happening in Skype or in a chat a window in Slack, and then you closed your application that you're sharing, everyone will be able to see that private conversation or that personal email that you might have been engaging with during the conversation. So you do want to be a little careful and exercise a little bit of screen discipline as you're choosing which part of your screen to share. Keep in mind, when you are sharing a screen or a window, a green border will appear around the application or screen that you're sharing. So you'll be able to tell which part of your system is being shared publicly with everyone else on the Zoom call. Now, what is this whiteboard feature? I'm sure many of you have had an experience with using the whiteboard. If you haven't, I strongly recommend that you mash that button next time you're in a Zoom call, or just start a Zoom call by yourself and mash the button just to see what it does. There are very, very few ways to actually break Zoom. That's why it's such a robust and popular platform. And so what you'll see is it's a really useful way to co-create, to brainstorm, to do things like SWOT analyses or free listing ideas with your class or with your colleagues. So that's this feature right here, the whiteboard button. And whatever you do in the whiteboard will get automatically saved, and you can save it iteratively as you're working through that exercise. Now, sometimes in the course of our lectures, we want to share a video clip. Maybe it's a clip of someone speaking, or a clip of a location in a village where we've worked. And in those instances, there may be sound that you want the students to hear from that video clip. Now, if you plan on showing a video clip, when you share your screen, do make sure to click one of these two checkboxes below, which indicate to Zoom that you intend to share your sound and that you want them to optimize the video clip. So there's less jitteriness and buffering as that video clip is showing. So that's a really, I think, an important pro tip that many people often forget. And then what ends up is people are chatting to you or saying, Professor Smith, I can't hear your sound. Can you please try again and do that? And so that's just important to keep in mind. Now, let's assume you've gone ahead and shared whatever window you were planning on sharing. Now I want to focus in on the annotate feature. And when you click on this annotate button, what appears is the bar that we see at the bottom with a whole range of new options that include mouse, text, drawing, stamping, spotlighting, erasing, and clearing. Now, all of these are fairly self-evident. A stamp is a stamp, a drawing is a drawing. A spotlight, I think they should have used the word laser pointer or laser, and that people would have clearly understood. Because as you're showing people around your complex slide, I often like to go to the spotlight and use that as a virtual laser pointer in a particular presentation. So I want to first focus on the button called Stamp. And we often use the Stamp button for different things. We often use it in classes when we're starting out as an icebreaker. We use it for different types of polling. And here's a good example. So when we start our class, we tell the students, go into your annotate function and choose a stamp, and let us know where you are joining us from in the world. And so students will go through and place a star on where they have logged in from, and you get to sort of break the ice and say, oh, it's fantastic. Someone's logged in from Belgium or from Bangladesh or from New York City. You'll often have a bunch of students who like to tell you they're from Antarctica. I don't think that's true, but it helps to insert a bit of humor into that first class and get the conversation going. Now, when you're done with this, you have to make sure that you remember to clear the window. Otherwise, what happens, using the garbage icon that you saw in the previous slide, otherwise what happens is you end up with, I'll actually show you, you end up with the stars that people placed on the screen populating the next slide and the next slide and the next slide. So it's very easy as the host of the meeting or one of the co-hosts of the meeting to click on the clear button and clear all the drawings so that you can start afresh. Now, as I mentioned, we sometimes use a stamp button to do this kind of polling. Now, of course, there are many polling features that are embedded within Zoom, as well as external softwares that you can embed into Zoom. But this is a fun way in which students can vote using their stamp tool to let you know which choice they prefer of these two choices that have been presented to them. And so you get sort of this live histogram of students voting for whichever choice they are most supportive of. And then you can have a discussion to say, oh, well, I see most people chose choice A. Why might that be? And go into more detail around that. Now, one of the things to keep in mind, remember I told you just a moment ago, make sure you clear the stamps or the drawings before you go on to the next slide. And I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. I'm clearing all the drawings. But the other thing that's important to do is make sure you go back and click the mouse key here on the left so that you're back in mouse mode and not in drawing mode. When you go into stamp mode or text mode or drawing mode, your mouse functions are actually suspended, making your mouse act like a pencil or a laser pointer or an eraser. And so it won't work as a mouse while the mouse feature is not selected. So if you're finding your screen is not moving to the next slide or you're somehow stuck, then go back and choose the mouse button explicitly so that you can reanimate your slides. Now going back to the annotate feature, let's move on to the next function that I'd like to highlight, and that's draw. And so let's say you're presenting a complex formula. Now, I mentioned earlier that you could use the laser pointer and guide people through the sample size formula, talking about each element and what it means. Or if you wanted to, you could choose a draw feature and then actually circle things and then show how elements of the formula appear in different places and actually interact much as you would do on a chalkboard or a whiteboard. So once again, what is the rule that we talked about a moment ago? Clear your drawings before you, and then select mouse again before you move on to the next slide. So now going back to annotate, let's take a look at the text tool. And this is one I use actually every year when we do a SWOT analysis. And so you instruct your students to go into the annotate tool, pick the text, and you'll have students talk about, government policy. They talk about waning enthusiasm, right? And the students can use different colors to indicate who's writing what. Different groups can be working on one quadrant or the other. You can talk about, training of health workers. And this way, as a class, you're talking through, you're dynamically entering this information onto the screen, and you're getting a lot of interactivity versus just a one-way lecture to the students. Again, make sure when you're done. Now, here's a quick sidebar. If you want to save the results of the screen, you'll recall that the last button on that annotate toolbar was a save button. And by pushing the save button, you can actually save what's on the whiteboard, right on the screen right then and there, and have a copy of that to share with the students, should they want to look at that as a reference later. Now, coming back again to the importance of these two buttons, the clear button and the save button. Keep in mind that you want to use those as needed during the course of your lecture. And don't forget the mouse button and the close button when you're done with your annotation teaching. Now, one of the things that I'm going to talk about just for a few seconds here is a pro tip. And that is something I often like to do because I find it sometimes difficult while I'm teaching to manipulate my mouse pad or my mouse to actually interact with the screen that the students are seeing. So what I like to do is log in simultaneously from another device into the same Zoom meeting. So I'll remember the Zoom login code, or I'll text myself the Zoom link before the lecture starts. And then I will pull out my device where I'm logged in a second time to that same meeting. And it's much easier to use the screen off your phone to annotate the lecture as things are going on. So I want to show you this. Log into your Zoom from your phone. It's easier to annotate, and you want to make sure you don't connect the audio when you're presenting from your other device. And so the presentation is on your laptop, but you're annotating from your device. And so I'm going to go ahead and clear the screen, and we can move on to the next slide. So here's an example, another impossibly complex formula. But rather than trying to explain this on the screen of my laptop, I'm just going to go into the annotate tool, and I can actually focus in using the highlighter feature on a part of the screen. I can highlight different things. I can zoom in and out very easily. I can direct students' attention to a particular segment of the formula, and it just makes it a lot easier than trying to manipulate the mouse. And often if you have an iPad with an Apple Pen, you can get very, very precise writing capacity on that second device than you might be able to do with a mouse and a non-touch screen interface. So similarly, I've used this for highlighting, say, community risks. When we're looking at these women in rural India who are threshing wheat, I can go through and highlight. So we can, as a class, we can say, let's identify all of the different ecological risk factors. So we can point out that there's there's an unaccompanied child, there's flying debris, there's an easy option for a hand injury here. There's all kinds of things that you can do interactively, again, using your second device as you're engaging with the content on the screen. So with that, I want to say thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me or any one of the other highly qualified experts who are helping us survive this new normal during the pandemic. So thanks so much, and hope to see you again.